Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, a video game discussion style podcast where we talk about all of the games that we love and some that you love too. This is not your regular host. This is McCann Tank of Doom. Or at least that's what I'm calling myself for this episode, because we're talking about a hidden gem from the PS1 era, Tiny Tank. And what a game this is. I'm joined today by friend of the show and somewhat regular of the show at this point, Charlie Young. Charlie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Rick. How's it going over there?
Oh, you know, it's trying to keep positive. You know, this dang tooth situation. My teeth hurt. My luxury bones hurt.
Well, it's great to be back. Thank you for having me again, and hopefully, some discussion of this hidden gem will help you ride through this moment of pain.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We are talking about Tiny Tank today. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, as I always say, stick around to the end of the show so you can hear where you can find us on social media, as well as our Discord, Patreon, etc. No listener responses for this one, nothing from the community forum, which I'm not really surprised about. This is not a super well-known game. And that brings me to another point. This is going to be a lighter episode, lighter in terms of content and length and all of that. But since the rest of this month is going to be absolutely dominated by Lost Odyssey, I think all of the discussion will be made up there, because that's a pretty meaty game. So it'll be nice to have a little palate cleanser before we get into that. So let's talk Tiny Tank. Man, if you had to describe this, or not describe, if you had to sort of sum up your feelings about this just in like a sentence or two, what are you thinking? How do you feel about this game?
Yeah, it's a little tough, I would say, returning to it in 2023. This is a game that I have a lot of nostalgia for from playing it back close to its release on the PS1. And at which point I was 9 years old, so I received it probably a little differently. But a lot of the fun is still there, and I can see, why I have such fond memories of it. But its age shows, and these days I'm not sure if I would consider it fun, or not fun in the same way that I was having fun with it when I visited it the first time.
I totally understand what you mean. I think with this game, when I was playing it, a lot of what I was thinking about was you've just got to meet it where it's at. And I've talked about that a lot on this show. You can't go into one thing expecting another and then be disappointed because that's on you. I think the same could be said of Tiny Tank, because this came out in a weird period of gaming history and, general gaming development trends and ideals were just so different back then. So a lot of this is, I hesitate to say, well, no, I don't hesitate. It is dated. It's dated, but there is fun to be had. Like you said, if you, if you allow yourself to have it. How many, playing this in 2023, how many Black Bart hats out of 10 would you give this?
That's a good question. In 2023, gut feeling, maybe this is generous, maybe this is, or maybe it's not generous, maybe it's fair, but I think I'm going to sit it around a 6. Again, using the full 10, not that kind of like, okay, we're going to say out of 10, but we're really only using the 5 through 10, half of that spectrum. Like, I think it has a lot of merits. Again, it is really funny. The humor is dated, but it's still like you can see the bones of the humor in there, and I still get a kick out of a lot of it. And a lot of it is just fun, even though, it has its warts. So I'm going to go solid 6 out of 10.
I see. That's totally valid. I'm a little cooler on it. I'd probably sit it right at a solid 5, just right down the middle. Warts and all, it's not a completely unenjoyable experience. And like you said, it is pretty funny. Which brings me to the next point. What is Tiny Tank? Well, Tiny Tank is essentially a third-person shooter with some platforming elements thrown in that we will talk about. Believe me, we will. Wherein you play the role of a cute killing machine by the name of Tiny Tank, entrusted to sort of get, well, it's not saving the human race, it's sort of getting revenge for the human race against this robot leader named Mutank. So the premise to this game is wild. And this is one of those games where you find out the premise a little bit through cutscenes, but a lot of it is within the manual. To sum it up, and Charlie, correct me if I miss anything here, essentially what happened was this global corporation, or maybe just U.S. corporation called Centrax, basically took over the Department of Defense, and they were disappointed when humans started voting for no more wars. So they put forward this bill to create a robot army, basically, of cute killing machines, of which Tiny Tank is a part. And they released a lot of promotional commercials, which you get to see in cutscenes in the game, to get folks to vote yes on this, to create a non-human army to continually fight wars. I think, what is the quote that it says in the game? Centrax, we bring you peace, one war at a time. Dystopian shit.
Yeah, for sure. And it's what's funny, or one of the interesting things is, from what I gather, Tiny Tank isn't, I mean, he is like a lethal killing machine, and that's the reason this whole thing works out, but he's actually just designed mainly as a mascot, even like within the lore. I mean, he is that kind of like mascot design as far as, you know, like maybe a potential mascot for PlayStation or for this franchise or whatever, but like in universe, he is a mascot. His main function is to win support for the vote, like you said. Humanity is still alive. Like they're underground, hiding in like basically asteroid bunkers. So Tiny is trying to like kind of make Earth safe for them again. And one other place a lot of the story comes from, and I'm sure we'll get to this, is in the levels you get this sort of like talk show radio kind of laid over, this like call-in show with Mutank as the host. And there's a lot of little lore tidbits sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah, those talk show bits are a nice touch. I think they're genuinely clever and very funny. They've got a real radio NPR feel to them. Like, you know, it's not, Mutank does not come on sounding like, "Hello, all humans, prepare to be destroyed." Ha 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 ha. It's nothing like that. He comes on like like he's right up against the mic and he's like, "Welcome back, everybody. This is Mutank, and looks like the human race. We got to thank you for bringing us into existence." And it's very bizarre and funny.
Thank you, Centrax Memorial Choir. Thank you, gentle listeners. You know, we're approaching the centennial of machine consciousness. 100 years since that freak accident, as the air breathers call it. We call it destiny. It granted us mind and made us the dominant life form on this wretched planet. Yes, we are a life form. If exposed to air, do we not rust? If forced to work in sandy areas with insufficient lubricant, do our gears not clog? Yet, despite our suffering, we will make this world an oxygen-free workspace. The atmosphere will be gone, and oxidation will no longer ruin our smooth, shiny surfaces. That is my promise. I am Mutank. Your calls after this.
My main gripe with this is that the surrounding game sounds and music, well, there's no music when the radio broadcasts are playing, but the surrounding game sound is so loud that I couldn't hear it half the time.
Yeah, I would agree. And I didn't, you can control, there are individual sound sliders for sound effects, music, and voice. And I should have like EQ'd that way towards the radio, but I didn't think about it until way late in my playthrough. And so a lot of that will just miss you. Even, you know, barring the sounds, just like the concentrating on blowing stuff up sometimes will make it hard to catch everything that's going on. Cause it's just kind of, to me, it harkens back to like the radio on GTA, like the first two GTA games, it's just kind of like laid over whatever is going on while you're in a car, which back then, what happened when I was in a car was going on a rampage, which is not dissimilar to what we're doing in this game,
Yeah, this is a chaotic game for sure. I should have tinkered with those sliders. I frankly, I didn't know that they were there. And it's a shame too, because there's some like funny comedy in there. There is this whole bit where Mutank is going on this whole spiel about like, what is a soft spot and should we have a soft spot for humans? Well, humans are sort of soft spots. So have they worked for us at all? Not really. And it's like, I knew it was funny by the cadence of it, but I just couldn't hear it because every time Tiny shoots something, he says, "Take that, Noodlehead," or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that it reminds me of, you said it reminds you of NPR, and I see that a little bit, but the call-in nature of it, and this is before my time, I would not be surprised to learn that you were a fan of this show. Did you ever watch Frasier?
I haven't.
And I haven't either, really. I mean, I think my dad used to watch it, so like it was on when I was around. That's my level of interaction with Frasier, but like that's the vibe I get off of how they portrayed Mutank and the timeline, the time frame of the release of this. So that makes perfect sense. That would have been at kind of Frasier's height of popularity, I would think. It's a little bit like smug and condescending, but it's like a call-in, like helpline, life coach kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've heard so many great things about Frasier. It's one of those shows that I'm always like, yeah, I'll get to that, right. But I never do. This game came out toward the end of 1999. It released in the US in August of 99, and the PAL version came out the following year in 2000 in February. So if you were feeling those Y2K blues, just pick up Tiny Tank. It'll be fine. And this, you mentioned that this was like a sort of mascot-based game or something to that effect, Charlie. And this came at a time when that was like a big thing for video games, especially for Sony. They were trying with Crash, they were trying with Spyro, Croc, which came out a little before that. Mascot games were huge. Gex, Glover. Shortly after in the PS2 with Vex. Just tons and tons of mascot games. It was an interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this it reminded me a lot of the like quippiness or not even quippiness, but like snarkiness of Tiny Tank reminds me of Gex, which is a game I haven't visited in a long time. So I'm pulling solely on what year is it? Jesus Christ! I'm pulling on 23-year-old memories when I say it reminds me of Gex. But you never know. Maybe another game that you and I will revisit and reminisce over someday. But like a snarky comeback to everything that happens, and a kind of like cynicism and sarcasm, that was very, very late 90s. It kind of puts you right back there, like, oh, all of the humor is dripping in this kind of cynicism from that era.
Yeah. Well, first of all, manifest the Gex talk, buddy. We'll make it happen. I've got Gex 1 on Saturn and PS1, and we're gonna do it. And that cynicism, that dripping, and that sort of like cynical sarcasm, the quippiness, the sardonic humor, it makes sense. This game was developed by Appaloosa Interactive, and they went on to also, or I didn't check the dates on this, they also were behind Echo the Dolphin and South Park, the PlayStation 1 game and N64 game. It was created by a company called And Now that seems to not exist anymore. But that snarkiness that comes from here, that comes from Gex, makes sense that Appaloosa would go on to do a South Park game. Seems right up their alley. And speaking of the sort of development history for this and reception, we that is to say me and you, Charlie, we could not find next to any information on how this game was made or what it was like.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting black hole on the internet. Like, there are little tidbits. Like, I was able to find maybe 2 playthroughs online. One of them was incomplete. No contemporaneous like advertisements. I found a scan of the instruction manual, but like there are some wikis and some like websites from back in those days, but they're largely incomplete, even like the contemporaneous ones. It's like people got excited about this game for the instant it came out and then gave up being excited for it before like a community could develop to like kind of sustain its legacy online.
Yeah, and I wonder if that would have been different had it come out, a little bit later, or even if it was released as an indie today. It certainly would be a better game, and that comes down to things like how it controls, things that were normal in game design at the time that have since sort of evolved. But we'll talk about gameplay in a minute. The reviews for this before it came out, the early reviews that folks were able to get before it was commercially released, they were mostly positive. And then once it did fully release, it got the reviews became much more middling. Lots of 5 and 6s out of 10s, lots of Bs and B minuses, things like that. This wasn't ever a super popular game. You're not going to find it under the greatest hits label. But one thing that I saw one reviewer say that did praise the game is that it sets out to do something and it accomplishes it. So I wanted to pitch that question to you. What do you think this game sets out to do, and do you think it accomplishes that?
Well, I would say that the humor is like the number one focus of the development team for this game. And everything else kind of follows that. Not follows as in supports, but like comes secondary too, right? One of the really high points of this game is the little cutscenes that happen between each level. The animation looks great. It's computer generated animation. The voice acting, which I do want to talk about separately, but like the voice acting, the comedic timing of it, the writing for it, I think is all really strong. But then when it comes down to the gameplay, everything seems to take a little dive in quality. The first couple of levels are kind of big, open. They don't actually put a big strain on like the controls of the game. Like you can get away with the controls being sloppy in those first couple of levels because they're pretty forgiving. And because of that, you can just kind of like fly around blasting everything indiscriminately, start to meet objectives, feel like you're progressing, and like have a big fun splashy time while you're doing it. It's not until those later levels when the game designers said, okay, we're in a harder level, we need a little bit more of a focused challenge. And then when you're come up against those focused challenges with kind of the sloppiness, that the game starts to reveal its flaws. So I think they had some good intentions. I think when you see those later levels, like there are a lot of cool ideas that just don't get executed very well because of how the game controls mostly.
Well said, man. I more or less agree with you completely. So I'm not even going to, expound upon that very much. I think that's very well said. We mentioned the humor a couple times already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a little bit of one of the early cutscenes. What happens in this game is you'll see cutscenes throughout that are marked as 100 years ago. And when we were talking earlier about this war, this promotional campaign to encourage the American people to vote yes to make a cute robot killing machine army, they're filming promos for that. That takes place 100 years ago, and then the gameplay all takes place 100 years later. And the game opens with one of those promotional cutscenes, and I'm going to play a little bit of it right now. Let's take a listen.
Rehearsal for Get Out the Vote promo. Take one. Hi, America. Hi, boys and girls. It's me, Tiny Tank.
Cue the theme song. Tinky Tinky Clinky Clanky, new from Centrex, Tiny Tank, America's lovable...
Wait. Is that my theme song?
Well, it hasn't been finalized yet.
Wanky, wanky, tanky, tanky, what the is that?
You're being difficult.
You're being an... I got a positronic brain.
There, what you just did. That's the spirit we want.
Who?
A Centrex, it wants funding for a robot army.
Ooh.
To replace humans in wars.
Ah, and I'm the cute little mascot.
To get people to vote yes.
Can I change my name at least?
To what?
Mechanicore? Tank of Doom?
From the top, Tiny.
Tiny Tank is my slave name.
Oh, please. Vote promo, take 2. Tiny?
Tiny's not here. I am Mechanicore, Tank of Doom.
Look, Tiny, you're cute and you're a killing machine. What's wrong with that?
It's creepy.
It's not creepy. It's cute. It's cute.
A cute killing machine? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I got an 80mm cannon for a nose. Hey kids, is this cute? Oops.
Okay, we'll wrap for the day, get another camera, try again tomorrow. You okay, Fred? I'm all right. Props, blanks for the tank next time?
I'm glad you wanted to put one of these in here. I was going to suggest, that's going to be the best way to get this across is just let them hear a little bit. Because I was trying to, do I want to take notes on all this dialogue? I don't know. I think people just need to hear it and they'll kind of get it immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So it's stuff like that. He's very quippy. He's a smartass. He's Tiny Tank. A lot of the humor, I mean, not all of it has aged particularly gracefully, but it's still pretty funny. I mean, you can listen to this, you could play this, you could watch this in 2023, and you can get a few chuckles here and there. A few chuckles, a few, nose exhales. Nothing laugh out loud funny, but, if somebody asked you afterwards, you would say, oh, yeah, that's pretty funny. And to your point, man, about the humor and the writing coming first, I agree wholeheartedly. It's very clear that they set out to make a mascot game where the mascot was kind of a smartass, like Gex. I mean, not unlike Gex at all. And even kind of Spyro a little bit. He's not quite as edgy as Tiny Tank, but it's sort of in the same vein. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What is this game rated? When I look back at it, I mean, they bleep out any outright profanity, but okay, it's rated T for teen. That makes sense. But yeah, it's raunchier than I would have expected 9-year-old me to be allowed to play. I guess my parents weren't really strict in that capacity, but I could see a lot of my peers being not allowed to play this game if the parents knew anything about what was going on. They wouldn't certainly be getting away with playing it in the family room with everybody sitting around watching, right? Right,
exactly so. I think I forgot to mention this too, but I never owned this as a kid, but my cousins did. They had a demo. There was a demo on a demo disc of this, and they had the full game as well. We never really played the story past the first couple of levels. We played the, what is it called? The whoop ass for 2 mode. there is a split screen versus mode where you can just shoot each other. So we never got super, super far, and I never owned it, but I always wanted to. Yeah, it is a little raunchier than you would expect, but I wanna talk about the gameplay because we've been dancing around it a little bit. We've talked about the gameplay. We called it a third-person shooter with platforming elements, and we both kind of did soft groans on that. So I want to talk about all of that right now. My biggest complaint whenever I first started playing this, I played it on PS2 with a controller. It controls it's stiff and fast. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it makes it feel kind of herky-jerky a little bit. It can be hard to be precise, even when a lot of situations demand precision. sometimes only a small burst of precision. Like, you just have to be precise for a small moment, but it can be really hard. Like, the prime example of this, and I've watched several, like I said, I was checking out some Let's Plays of this as well. And one guy was like really good at the game. He did the whole game in basically what I would consider like the minimum amount of time to do it. It was just under an hour and a half. He did it straight through without losing a life. He was playing on hard difficulty, and still, like, jumping onto the little platform that lets you exit the level, he would take like 2 or 3 tries to do it. And I was like, thank God I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I saw that same playthrough. I don't know how that guy got so good at the game. It's kind of crazy. You mentioned that it feels herky-jerky to control and it's hard to be precise. One of the first things that I noticed, well, there were 2 things that I noticed right away. The first thing that I noticed that's just kind of bizarre is that, you know, when you press forward and left on a controller when you're driving a vehicle, it's usually analogous to driving forward and turning the steering wheel left in a car, right? And that's what it is in this game too. So you would think if you reversed and did the same thing, it would, you know, you would go backwards and swing your front side to the right, you know, like you were backing up and steering left. That is not so. It is the opposite, actually, because the way this game controls is if you're pressing left, you are rotating your nozzle, your cannon for a nose, as Tiny says all the time. You are rotating that to the left. So if you're doing that while backing up, you're actually swinging to the right. And that took, I don't think I ever got used to that, actually.
Absolutely. I noticed it early on. I was like, why can't I figure out this? And then it dawned on me like, oh, it's because backwards is wrong. It's from any other, you know, vehicle you've ever operated in real life or in a video game. And you're right. You just can't get used to it. Like, I would have to be fully stopped and go, I know which direction I need to go, and then I could do it. But I couldn't ever get my muscle memory to remember that backing up was the unintuitive way.
And it wouldn't be such a big deal if there were more opportunities to like replenish your health and your lives, or less enemies, but it gets pretty tricky as things go on. There's an early level where there are several different kinds of giant robots that are shooting at you, and I'm pretty sure at least one of them, like one kind of them, are indestructible, and they're just going to keep firing at you if you're around them. So it makes it difficult. There is definitely an element of you gotta move to this game, right? There's an element of you need to constantly be moving. This is not a what do they call it in marching band?
Park and bark.
Park and bark. Yes. I was going to say park and blow. Same thing. Park and spray. It's anything that sounds dirty like that. This is not it. You've got to keep moving, and it can be a little frustrating. It's one concession that I think they made to come off of that. And I know I said there was another thing that I found frustrating with the controls, but I'll get to that in just a sec. One concession that they made to compensate for this notion of like, you got to go, is the shooting mechanic. You know, you press square to shoot, you shoot out of your front nozzle. You can also get some pickups that add cannons and various guns to your tank body.
Your arsenal.
Yeah, yes, some might say, but not me. It's all auto aim, so it'll automatically lock onto enemies that are around you. What did you feel about this? How did you feel about this?
I think overall, it's what makes the game work. Without it, this game would be impossible. But it is a blessing and a curse because the AI for it isn't perfect and can lead to some frustrating moments when you think, to my human eyes, this is the intuitive thing that it should be auto-targeting, and yet it's picked some enemy that's further away or not in front of me, or sometimes not even in your line of sight. It's around a corner when there's another enemy like parked, maybe even touching you, and it's locked onto something else and it won't switch until that thing dies. You can manually switch it, but in those like fast-paced moments where it's like, I need to be moving and I need to be shooting and I need to be re-auto-targeting. Sometimes those precious seconds can, lead to you dying or taking way more damage than you feel like you should because the AI was a little janky in that moment. And the other thing about that auto-target is you you don't have control over your vertical aim. You can just swivel left or right, but there are enemies that'll be above you or below you, and the auto takes care of that. It auto goes up to that enemy or down, so that it's helpful in that way, except when, again, you need the camera to be focused in a certain place, and it's auto-targeting to somewhere like, above level of your point of view. So it swings the camera up, and then Tiny doesn't control the same way when he's off camera. Like, he doesn't have the same momentum. He can't jump as high. So there are lots of little moments of frustration, again, especially in the later levels when precision is a little bit more paramount to your success. But overall, I think, the game wouldn't work without it. And a lot of it is fun because you can just kind of hold square and run around and things blow up around you and, yahoo, it's dumb fun.
Yeah, man. Well said. I agree with you on all of that. It's absolutely a blessing and a curse. And I want to save that discussion about the camera for when we talk about, how the levels get increasingly more demanding of your movement. But yeah, the ability to not move your tank nozzle up and down can be tricky if there's an enemy coming at you on the ground, but your mission objective is an obelisk of some sort that you have to shoot down. Then suddenly your AI doesn't know what to do, and it might do different things depending on, the precise angle you're at or how you came into the frame. It's a little bit, as much as you cannot park and blow for this, it almost wants you to in certain instances, and it's always at the worst time. And that's, I died quite a bit because of the auto aim just not doing what I was expecting it to do. Yeah.
And you combine that with sometimes being able to get stuck on geometry that doesn't seem like it's something you should be, like in modern gaming, it wouldn't be some sort of geometry that you would get stuck on. But you can, like, that searching for the perfect angle to make the auto target do what you think it's supposed to be doing. And then you'll get into, like, you'll move yourself into a corner and get stuck on an enemy and then just be stuck there until you die. It can be frustrating.
Real quick before we talk about other gameplay elements, the other thing that frustrated me with this was how you physically move Tiny. So this game features optional support for dual sticks. And I didn't know that at first. My PS1 controller that I use the most doesn't have the DualShock sticks. It just has the D-pad. So I thought, oh, hey, I'll just boot this up on PS2. I'll use my PS2 controller, and I'll be able to use the sticks so I can control Tiny, and it'll be better. It's not. It's not, because you can still only control on two axes, the north-south and east-west. Even if you're using a stick, you're not really going to have full 360 control. And I don't know, man. It's just, it feels very bad to control with the stick. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a very visceral feeling. Like when I'm playing and trying to control him with the stick, it doesn't feel like I'm using a stick. And it just goes back to feeling unintuitive in my hands. And it's hard to fault it for that. Like I can't rightfully call that a con, because this was made in 1999, and game design at that time, it was more primitive. I don't want to use primitive because that has a negative connotation, but you know what I mean. It wasn't as polished as it is today.
Yeah, underdeveloped, maybe.
Underdeveloped, yeah, precisely so. It was in its infancy, we could say. I'm speaking out of my own arsenal, some could say. And the other thing is, too, if you're going to allow for dual stick support, I don't understand why you couldn't just use the right stick to move your camera up and down, or not your camera. Well, yes, your camera or your nozzle, your gun. I don't understand why that wasn't implemented. Maybe because of how early this came out in gaming history. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't have a good temperature on that era of gaming development. I'm sure there were innovations kind of being dropped left and right, and we look back at that era and we say, like, oh yeah, X, Y, and Z all came out of that. But month to month, you never know what game was bringing which innovation and what stages of development different games were in when those things, became more widely accepted. So I think you're right on the money. Like, it's hard to fault it for those things, but it definitely shows its age.
Hard to fault it, but definitely something to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about just generally how the game plays, because this is a video game first and foremost. The story takes a back seat to the humor, yes, but also to the gameplay. And here's what happens. You control Tiny, and you're traversing all of these levels to basically destroy all of these robot armies. They can be robot versions of you, just general robot-looking things. It's kind of tough to parse out what they look like given the graphics. You've got 2 bars at the top of the screen that represent your health and the amount of nanometal you have. Nanometal, it's such a weird thing. Essentially what it is it's a second health bar. It doesn't function like a health bar because when you get hit, you lose health. If you've got full nanometal, essentially you regain health. The in-game explanation is that nanometal is essential for the onboard fix-it crabs to repair Tiny. I guess these are nanobots.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money. Non-intuitive. Again, like, throw it on the pile of things in this game that are non-intuitive. But I never had a sense when I looked up at that bar that I knew what its significance was, even though I knew the explanation that you just said. Like, playing it in game, I just ignored that bar completely and looked at the health bar because I was like, okay, when the health bar reaches 0, bad.
Exactly. And that's important to note too, because a lot of these mechanics in the game aren't explained in the game. They're touched upon in the instruction manual, but the game doesn't tell you your left from your right as far as these are concerned. Some of the other things that are involved in playing the game, you've got what are called P-brains. These are Tiny's artificial intelligence system. They can basically be used to improve and upgrade your weapons. And speaking of those, you do get weapons. You can pick up weapons whenever you destroy certain robots, robots, as I like to call them. And these are actually essential to playing the game. You can pick up like mortars, flamethrowers, rocket launchers. They do a lot of damage, and they are on your front and your back side. So you're kind of it's not quite like a shmup really, but you're getting those Vampire Survivors style of upgrades where you're doing damage out of your front and out of your, well, I shan't say it. Ass is what I was alluding to. You're very quiet.
No comment. I'm just like dying, chuckling over here. Sorry.
Do you think that we're the first podcast to bring up Vampire Survivors and Tiny Tank in the same sentence?
We might be the first podcasters to bring up Tiny Tank. So I would have to think that yes, we are.
By default. I love winning by default. It's the best. And we've already talked about the nanometal. You can replenish your nanometal. They're little drops in game. You can also, in addition to your weapons to damage enemies, you've got what are called teeny weeny tanks. Did you use these very much?
Almost never. Sometimes in desperation when I felt like I couldn't figure out what was supposed to be happening, which in fairness was frequent, I would just deploy one in hopes that something good would happen by accident. There was a time in the last level that I tried to use them on purpose, and it didn't do any good. It looked like it was designed to be used in this specific instance, like there was a space that Tiny couldn't get through, but the teeny weeny tanks could. So you press circle to deploy them, but if you hold circle, you can like remote pilot them. And so I was remote piloting it through this little space that Tiny couldn't get through, but could never like get to the enemy that I was trying to reach with it. So it ended up still being no benefit. I know they have several modes. I think maybe if I had spent more time thinking about it, I might have used them in the protect mode in some of those heavy fire parts of the game where you tend to die frequently. But no, basically never used them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I used them once because, and we'll talk about the environment here too. There's a point pretty early on where you're met with these like electric fences that will do damage to you if you touch them, but your objective is beyond them, and you have to destroy this tower. And the correct way to do it is to just let your auto aim target the, I don't know, I guess you would just call it the power source of the electric fence, and it will, it'll get destroyed. What I thought you had to do was pilot the teeny weeny tanks underneath of the electric fence and destroy the tower that way, which would have been much cooler, in my opinion, but it did not work. And once I figured out what I was supposed to do, that was basically the end of me using the teeny weeny tanks. It's a very cool idea. I don't know. They didn't do almost anything with it.
Yeah, it was a real missed opportunity. Like I said, the guy I watched who was very skilled at the game, I don't think deployed one ever. And you're right, there's places in the game where they had opportunities to present you with a situation that is obviously needs one of those like to be completed. And it would have been a cool way to teach you how to use the mechanics and then be able to expand on them later. But it was just kind of one of those things that were like, this would be cool, throw it in. And that might have been the last time they thought about it, which is unfortunate.
You know what I bet it was? I bet it was a multiplayer thing that they just thought would have been fun in multiplayer.
Yeah, maybe so. I didn't get to engage with multiplayer, and I was actually, this isn't the place for that discussion, but I'm interested in your thoughts about that, maybe after we talk about levels or whatever, but as somebody who got to play that as a kid, because I haven't seen any footage of it, I don't know what those levels look like.
Oh, I wouldn't have anything meaningful to say, man. It was so long ago, and honestly, it wasn't even so much about playing the game. It was just hanging out with cousins. It didn't matter what was happening on screen. It could have been garbage. I don't know. But all that to say, I mean, I do have two controllers. If we're ever in the same room again, just lug out the old PS2, PS1, and fire it up.
This may be too far a tangent for such an esteemed podcast as pixelprojectradio, but there is, I think currently this weekend, a weekend of recording, a Shrek-themed rave in Minneapolis. And Lauren thought maybe that you would want to come up, meet us there, and attend a Shrek rave.
Some donkey.
That Shrek rave was recently in Pittsburgh, I think. I didn't get to go. I think it'll be fun. I would like to go at some point. Where'd you say it was? Minneapolis?
I think so, but I think it's tomorrow.
Oh gosh, that's a little too short notice.
Yeah.
That's okay. It travels all over the country. We could definitely make it happen.
All right, so you, me, Shrek, Tiny Tank, 2 PS1 controllers. We'll make it happen. Oh, and bring Gex along, I suppose.
Oh, of course, just for good measure. You've got to have Gex.
What were we talking about?
I don't remember, dude. This game is so wild. Oh, that's another mechanic that is technically a mechanic because it's listed as an action in the instruction manual. If you press triangle, Tiny Tank will talk.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads me to the next point. Tiny Tank talks too goddamn much.
Yeah, that's all he does.
Anytime you destroy something, he has some kind of quip that he says.
Yeah, every time you destroy each of the 86 enemies in a level, he cycles through one of his 5 catchphrases for that level. He does add some, like he gets some new ones the further you get into the game, but certainly not enough to keep them fresh.
Yeah, the one that kept happening for me was So Long, Noodlehead, and now that I say it out loud, like, that's not offensive, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, noodle is just another word for, like, brain, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know, man. It's hard to tell sometimes. There are a couple of lines in the cutscenes where it was like, oh yeah, you couldn't really say that today, but yeah, I don't know why they assigned a talk button to Tiny Tank because he's constantly yapping anyway. But hey, if you really find this cute or funny, you can just press that and he'll talk to you. I guess the only other buttons that we didn't mention, you can do a sidestep and a barrel roll, which honestly for me was extremely useful, especially given the auto targeting system. If you just spam the rolls and hold down square, you can mow through a lot of enemies and bosses. I think that's actually entirely how I beat Black Bart, which is the first boss in the game. There's nothing more to him. Like, I know we're just mentioning Black Bart and not talking about him. That's all the game tells you too. He just exists. But all I did was just barrel roll back and forth and hold down square, and eventually I won.
Yeah, this was a pretty useful mechanic. It makes me it's obviously necessary because of the way the tank controls and the camera. Like, the tank controls and the camera are related in that the camera is always facing forward to the tank treads. So like Tiny's nozzle will swivel, even shooting backwards from your camera and tread angle if that's where the auto targeting is locked onto. So your camera isn't related to the nozzle at all, which like intuitively you would think that would make sense, I guess. But I'm glad it's not that way. However, in order, you just can't move, you can't strafe, right? So that's the thing, like the part of movement that's missing. And obviously a tank can't strafe, but relatively, like if you then affix the camera to the nozzle of his gun rather than the treads, like you would certainly be able to strafe the treads while keeping the nozzle focused on the target. Like that's a different direction they could have gone with this. But I think the way that they chose to keep the camera affixed to the treads was probably the best way to go about it. It probably felt the best if I'm just kind of guessing how the other configuration might have felt. And so I think that kind of like side jumping and side barrel rolling, even though it's not a very elegant motion, is probably like a pretty good solution for not being able to strafe in this game.
Well, most tanks can't strafe, this is true, but most tanks also can't engage in a knockoff of an Abbott and Costello bit with announcers.
Rehearsal for Get Out the Vote promo 2. Take 1. Tiny?
What?
Lines?
What are they?
Fred?
Fred?
No, I'm talking to Fred. Fred? What? Tiny lines? Hi there.
Hi, Fred.
No, that's your line.
What?
Hi there.
Hi there.
Good.
Hi there. You know the Centrax motto, bringing you peace one war at a time? Well, that's a way of life at Centrax. A yes vote on July 4th is a vote for sentient killing machines. They'll die, so you won't have to. Vote yes, and who knows? War fought by humans could be a thing of the past. Humans will be free to raise their families in safety. That's more than a promise, it's a hope. And at Centrax, hope is what life is all about. For hope, for life, vote yes.
Good.
That's the most mealy-mouthed bunch of crap I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe that came out of my mouth. Somebody shoot me.
That's right. Express your rage. Let it spew. Let it out. Feel better? Yeah, lots. Not you, Fred.
Hi there.
Hiya. Stop it. Cut it out. Cut. From the top.
All logic is thrown out of the window with Tiny Tank, man. They didn't care. No constraints for them. This was the game they dreamed of making, and they made it, god damn it. And speaking of things that most tanks can't do, it's about time we talked about the platforming. Because man, oh man. Tiny Tank can jump. You can jump, which most tanks can't do, but Tiny Tank can. And you have a sort of double jump. It's more of a, you activate these rocket propellers that are underneath your treads. And it gives you a little bit of a boost, not too much, but it'll also let you down gently if you, hold it in. And the platforming in this game is based entirely around that. And man, is it frustrating. You reached out to me first specifically to talk about the platforming, so I want to let you take this one.
Sure. I just started spamming Rick's messages, venting all of my frustrations. I think at one point I sent a message that just said, I'm 75% of the way through this game, and I just found out there's a double jump. Again, non-intuitive, because the double jump, like you said, it's like not that much of an extra boost. The repulsor thing I figured out early, where you jump and hold X, it kind of glides you down. But if you time it right, that when those engines kick in, it gives you like another 3 pixels of height, which in some cases is the difference between life and death. For instance, when you're trying to do very precise platforming on moving metal platforms on a lava lake. And if you can't jump off them at the correct time, you're standing on the lava and you can't jump onto the platform that you're supposed to exit that little section onto. But that extra 3 pixels of height would have gotten you off. I rage quit there before, full disclosure, playing the rest of the game with cheats on. So, and like, even the cheats, which are part of the game, like there's a cheat menu you have to activate with a button combination. If you turn on an invulnerability, you like suddenly don't interact with platforms anymore. You just phase through them.
Oh, wait, really?
So you can't, like, and I don't think that's the game design. I think it's just like they didn't think this through. So this lava lake level that I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say how long it took me. How Long to Beat says this game takes 2 hours. I definitely have like 5 or 6 hours on playthrough to get ready for this podcast because I wanted to see the whole game. And there were just sections that I sent Rick a screenshot of one level that took me 1 hour and 6 minutes. And it's like a, 6-minute level.
My favorite part about that screenshot, too, is when you complete a level, it'll show you how many lives you have and how many P-brains you have. Remember, that's one of the pickups you can get. But it just says brains, and for yours, it said 0 brains. And I was like, classic.
Yeah. I typed like a 2-paragraph indictment on how the camera and autofocusing works, and then realized later that like I don't think I was just hitting jump at the right time. I think all of that was not true, all of that stuff that I said.
Hi, everybody. Future Rick here. You might have heard back there while Charlie was talking a little bit of a commotion, a bit of a kerfuffle, some shenanigans going on, a hootenanny, you might say. And you're going to hear it once or twice again. So Charlie and I recorded this a while ago, and I don't know what that was. I don't know what was going on Charlie's end, and since it was going on while he's talking, I can't really remove it very well. And I didn't want to delete everything Charlie was saying because it's relevant to the conversation. So I'm going to offer a little suggestion. Why not, stick with me here, why not just imagine that sound is Tiny Tank himself breaking into Charlie's place of residence to enact revenge on the libel and the slander that Charlie has been dishing out, that we've both been dishing out. He just happened to find Charlie first. I mean, what can I say? It'll be fun. Just imagine it. He hears all the clamoring, all the hooting and hollering, all the shit talking, and he's steamed. He's mad. His ass is chapped. His gears need greased. So he's busting in to take care of business. Just picture it. It'll be fun. So sorry about the audio disruptions. Hope that gives you enough of a chuckle to power through the rest of this very serious, very academic episode as we continue talking about this smart-ass little tank. Thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying the episode. And all right, let's hear what we had to say all those moons ago. Let's get back to the show.
So yeah, to say that I was frustrated with the platforming would be an understatement. The platforming becomes an essential part of the game, like in the middle third, and beyond that, it becomes less important, less like a barrier to success. So if you can get through those couple of levels that are incredibly frustrating, there is some more fun to be had on the other side of them. But yeah, it was like, well, this tank can move, so I guess let's make them jump through some hoops to say that we checked that box. I don't know. It seemed like it wasn't that well designed. And beyond like the tank barely having the capabilities to actually perform the platforming, even if you control him well, some of the things were just really unforgiving. Like the level design was unforgiving, where you might have to jump across 10 like individual platforms, but if you get to the 8th one, jumping to the 9th one and miss, you have to go back to the beginning, and there's no like re-entry point. There's no way to like bank any of that progress. So you just had to do it perfect 9 or 10 times in a row. And with the controls as challenging as they were, it took me half hour, 45 minutes to do a perfect run of those 10 jumps. And in between, it was just drive back, try to line up again. The camera autofocuses on something that makes me not be able to jump on the first one. It just wasn't fun.
I think you're right on the money when you said that they included this as a sort of checkbox, right? Because, this is still coming out of the era where games had to occupy a lot of time because we just didn't have that many back then. This isn't quite that, but kind of. And again, this is something that's kind of like, it's frustrating, but it's also like lovable 90s jank, where it's like, I can't in good faith call this a con because game design was, like we said, it was in its infancy, but at the same time, we got to talk about it. It seems like the platforming and the way they design the jumps and the jump physics just don't mesh well together. Like on their own, it's fine. If the jumping and the jump physics were better, the platforming would have been a lot of fun, to be honest. I mean, hell, if the jump and the jump physics were better, more platforming, give me more of it. But together, the way that they interact, it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like walking with one leg 4 inches shorter than the other. It's just this perpetual hobble, and you can never quite, move gracefully. And it's frustrating. You mentioned the lake of magma or lava. The frozen lake is the one that got me because you have to jump across these frozen ice blocks. And what they don't really explain well, or if they did explain it, I just completely missed it, is if you just straight up jump onto one, you'll sink and you immediately lose a life, which is worth noting because in this game, lives are finite, and when you run out, you don't continue. You have to reload all over again. So what you have to do instead of just flat jumping onto these things is sort of hover down with your double jump. Again, if they explain this, I must have just not been paying attention, but that was supremely frustrating to me. Another area, this isn't platforming so much as it is just movement and camera, but another area was at the very beginning of the game where you have to go through this hallway. It's a steep incline hallway, and there are boulders falling down at you. And that's fine. I mean, that's, totally cool. The problem is that the tunnel is a cylinder, and Tiny Tank has this really cool ability where he can traverse a lot of terrain. Like you can just drive straight up a plateau. No big deal. What this means, though, is that Tiny Tank will try to drive up the wall. The camera will think that you're trying to look up, and the camera will immediately look at the ceiling, which means you don't move you don't move so good no more, and you just get pummeled by all these boulders. And I died, I kid you not, Charlie, I died like 3 times in a row trying to get through that stupid tunnel because of Tiny Tank trying to look at the ceiling the whole time. I was so mad. I think that's when I messaged you the first time, and I was like, I hate this. This sucks.
Yeah, when I got that message, I didn't expect you to be that early in the game, to be honest, because I knew all the frustrating stuff that was coming later. So yeah, I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised that you had that experience, but I'm surprised we got to the point where we're recording this episode. I mean, there were times where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to finish this. I think I'm just going to watch a playthrough, and I think that's going to be fine.
Full disclosure, I didn't finish this game. I watched the final area and the final boss fight just on YouTube from that one guy that was like really good at the game. And that final boss, I would have been really frustrated because that's a bit of a gauntlet, and I don't know. Do they explain what you're supposed to do super well? I couldn't get a grasp on that.
You said you were playing this on PS2, is that right?
Yeah, PS2.
I was playing this, I was emulating this, and so there were times where I couldn't tell if the jank was the emulation or the game itself. But towards the end, when I was having such trouble getting through the middle section, I was using the level select cheat a lot to like jump to the part of the game where I was like, okay, I've gotten to here. I just need to try this level over and over again. So I would jump to a level after a game over, and then I would skip the cutscene video at the beginning of the level, and then the mission objective audio would be like 30 seconds delayed. So it would visually show me all of the little things and give me the little spiel, go here, destroy this thing responds to this type of fire or whatever. And then I would start the level, and then the audio would start playing for those things. So I never had the audio and visual of like the mission objectives synced up. And so that was another frustrating thing. Like the audio tracks just like didn't trigger at the right time. And I couldn't tell if it was something I was doing by using cheats or if I was using emulation or if it just gets, screwed up sometimes. So there were times where I'd have to go to that playthrough video just to watch the little objective intro movie. Which honestly, sometimes, I feel like they were trying to find that line between we want to give them enough to figure out what to do, but we don't want to give them the answer. And I just think they weren't really good at finding that line. So they were trying to be mysterious at some times, but they didn't actually give you enough information to like figure out what the answer was. There were so many times in this game where I would like reach an objective or like satisfy an objective or get past a certain point, and I would not understand how it happened or what I did to do it correctly. And I just said, okay, I guess I'm past that now. And then I would just keep going. So like in that same way, you don't get that little hit of dopamine when you figure out a puzzle. You're like, okay, the puzzle's behind me now. I guess I just keep going. The frozen lake was a little bit like that for me, where like I couldn't figure out how to do it. I tried, 15 times in a row. I watched the video of the guy do it. I tried to do what he did. Again, another 5 times goes by, and then I do it by accident once, and I beat the level. Thank God I didn't have to do it again. But I still don't know what I did to make me successful to get across the lake.
I'm glad that you brought that up because, if I'm going to make one generalized criticism about this game, it is that it does not tell you in clear terms what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to do it. And that was frustrating literally every single level I played, except for maybe the first 2. A great example, speaking of that level with the uphill incline tunnel, is it that level? Yes, it is that level. There are certain areas that you have to go through. Your map will tell you, hey, go through this hallway. But there will be boulders in the hallway. So you think, or so I think, okay, I shoot the boulders. And you do, and that is how you're supposed to proceed, to be fair. But the problem is there's no visual indication that the boulders are taking damage. It's the exact same effect as if you were to turn and just shoot any random wall. Like there's no visual cracks, there's no sparks flying, there's nothing to indicate that what you're doing is correct. And in a scenario where it's like a straight hallway, there's only one way to go, that's fine. But there were several times when that wasn't the case. And I don't know, man, it frustrated me a lot. I know there's a couple of those instances later in the game. Were the trains like that? Do you remember the train level where you had to shoot down those trains that are circling?
Yeah, that's the spot where you were talking about some of those tall robots were indestructible.
Yes, yeah.
Again, I kind of beat that by accident, by just brute force, running and spinning and firing as much as I could in that area until something sounded like it exploded. When I watched the video of the guy do it after the fact, I was like, oh, you're supposed to hit these 3 spots that are red, turn them green, and then the thing will open, and then its vulnerable part will be shown, and then you can blow that up. But there's so much destruction going on with those robots that are very powerful and can kill you in very few hits, and your guns keep trying to auto-target them instead of the objectives, and they're indestructible, so it doesn't make any sense for them to be auto-targeted. It's one of those moments, too, where when it finally happened, I didn't know what happened until I watched a video of somebody doing it, and I was like, oh, that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah, geez. And I mean, I think all of this is more than just, charming 90s jank. I think this is just straight up annoyances, because there are plenty of games that were doing exactly the opposite of this and giving you feedback on what you were doing. Is it correct? Is it incorrect? You'll know based on the feedback. We don't get any here. And that is a little frustrating.
Yeah, there's technical jank and then there's game design, and I think they were lagging in both areas, but then when you put them together, it created some very frustrating moments.
Yeah, here. So as far as the rest of the game goes, I mean, we didn't talk story because there's really not much to it. I mean, it gives you all of the story in the little cutscenes, which honestly are mostly just kind of to showcase the humor and the voice acting, which again is really nice. But there's really not a story. This is just all about gameplay. It's giving your thumb something to do. It's, stuff on the screen. You get to the end, you fight Mutank. That's pretty much it. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to the story? Because I really don't.
No, not a ton. I would say when I watched the long play, kind of skimming through the gameplay and just focusing on the videos again a few hours before we recorded, and there is a little thread of like kind of watching Tiny go through this small emotional arc of like, why am I alive? Oh, I'm this tool to do this thing. And then he starts to get like snarky over it because he disagrees with it. And then he kind of gets worn down, and then he kind of accepts playing the role. And then he gets a little loopy. Like he goes through these like different emotional headspaces each video that comes back, which is kind of cool. There's like a variety of ways that he's responding to this yoke that he has. So, and maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but I think there is a little more than just he's the same snarky person in every single cutscene. So I think that's worth some praise.
Ladies and gentlemen, Centrax is pleased to introduce Tiny Tank.
Hi, America. Hi, boys and girls. As you can see, the vote is in.
A little more energy, Tiny.
Sure. The vote is in, and well, you voted yes. You can see where all your money went. Here it is, the Centrax Army. Thousands of machines to do your fighting for you. I gave you what you wanted. I'm the one who talked you into it. You happy now? I know I am.
Tiny?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Centrax Army.
Cue applause. Gotcha.
As a reward for your support, we will now demonstrate the awesome firepower of America's new army and my humble attempts at self-defense.
More energy, Tiny.
Whatever. Don't worry. They're shooting blanks.
Well, don't tell them that.
Well, it's the truth, isn't it? This is all bullshit.
Stick to the script.
And the other thing, like, okay, the comedic timing, and I couldn't figure this out because, like we said, there's so little information. In the credits, there's like 6 voice actors listed, but it doesn't say who does what. And a lot of them, I think, are just like one-off little voices of like the radio call-in people. But I think there's basically one guy who did the voice of like the director, Tiny Tank, maybe Fred, who's the cameraman of these like little advertisement recording sessions, and Mutank, and a lot of the call-in people. I think there's one guy that did all of that, and they just modulate his voice up and down, and he adds a little bit of accent, but you can basically tell it's the same guy. Like, that guy has a lot of talent, a lot of comedic timing to be able to record all of those disparate parts and have them banter back and forth with each other. I think that's worthy of a lot of praise as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now that you mention it, Mutank and one of the directors of the commercial, they do sound pretty similar.
Yeah.
Another thing that we didn't talk about really is the music. I don't really have a lot to say on that either, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's loud at times. But there is nothing really that stood out to me. It kind of cycles on a loop. It'll, get to the end, it'll stop for a few beats, and then it'll start up again, or, it'll stop, the radio broadcast will come on, and etc. Weirdly, there isn't a dedicated composer listed in the credits, in the instruction manual. It's listed as music and sound director being Brian Coburn. And I looked him up. I'm not sure if this is the same guy, because while he does have a sort of Wikipedia page on vgmpf.com, it doesn't have Tiny Tank listed. It doesn't have And Now listed. It does have listed that he composed for Echo the Dolphin, Mr. Bones for Saturn as well, and Death Jr. for PSP. Well, he was involved in Death Jr. anyway. So I think this is the right guy. He was a Sega composer. I don't think he composes much anymore, but, I just wanted to bring it up just so we touched all the bases.
Yeah, I think there's so much focus on the other elements of the game and the other sound elements of the game that the music is easy to overlook. I meant to try to look up just standalone recordings of this soundtrack, just so that I could kind of focus on that without the visual noise of the game and the focus of playing the game. Forgot to do that, but I was thinking about it at some points. Like, there's a decent variety of types of music. I mean, I think it's basically like you're listening to the radio. I think that's the effect they're going for. So you get interspersed music that is in a variety of styles with this radio show that kind of cycle back and forth with one another. You're right, there's not a ton of it, so you get the same tracks like popping up over and over again. But there are like at least 3 that stand out in my memory. There's one that's kind of like a 90s, I want to say whatever genre the Full House theme music is, where there's like a rock and roll saxophone solo going on.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
See, and now if I can't find dedicated tracks for this game, I'm just going to remix that with a lot of reverb and turn it into this.
Please do. There's also like some heavy metal-ish kind of stuff, and then there's also a little bit of like electronica that uses like digital noise, like bleep bloop kind of things sampled in as well. So all very 90s feeling, like it was trying to be contemporary popular music that just cycled through, and my guess is like to make it feel like that radio dial, like channel surfing, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way, but I think you're right. That was probably the effect, especially with the radio broadcast with Mutank. You know who doesn't agree with us about the music? Somebody that rated the audio and video 10 out of 10 is this reviewer on GameFAQs. I have lately been fascinated by going back and looking up old reviews on GameFAQs from pre-2000, if I can help it. This one here that I found on Tiny Tank is from 2003. And he ranked the game a complete 10 out of 10, which is bonkers to me. And he wrote down some real gems that I wanted to read out while we're on the air. Under gameplay, he writes, "The gameplay is great. The only flaw is the auto-targeting system, but it's only really minor, and a true die-hard gamer not unlike yourself, parentheses, or so I hope, can shun this minor flaw and enjoy the rest of the game."
What the is that?
Love it. Absolutely love it. Towards the end, replayability, about 3 times. You can play this 3 times in a row and not get bored, mainly because of the difficulty levels. I just recently got back into it since I am grounded, and I am bored a lot, and I want to blow up a few things, so I choose this game to relieve these horrible emotions.
Gee, I thought I was cute.
I love that nugget. I am grounded.
I know. We need more reviews like this. I don't listen. I love Noah Caldwell-Gervais. I love these like intense video essays, but I want more stuff like this. I want to hear the kid that is like detailing little nuggets of his life while he's playing this game. He goes on to say at the very end, "It's a shame that this doesn't get as much attention and never really got into the big time like Final Fantasy and Halo. Damn shame indeed." In what universe is the? In what universe would this be as big as Final Fantasy or Halo?
We do have fun, don't we?
This kid is writing from, he's got his light on, but like Dave Jackson in his childhood, he's got his towel against his door so that his parents don't know that his light's on because he's up way past his bedtime. I'm talking 9:45, 10 p.m. And he is just tapping this review out to his heart's content.
He's written a couple of reviews. Tiny Tank, the title of the Tiny Tank, by the way, is A Kept in the Shadows Great Game with a whole lot of periods after it. I love that.
All I heard was a hole.
You know what else I found is as I was trying to dig up some stuff on the development history for this, I always really like going to the dedicated like fandom wikis because, you know, a lot of the times they've got really great nuggets in them that Wikipedia doesn't have or, you know, wherever on the internet doesn't have. It didn't work. The Tiny Tank entry on the tinytank.fandom.com, you know, is basically empty, but there was a suggested popular page titled Tiny Tank 2, The Revenge of Mutank. So I clicked on it because I was like, oh, I didn't know this game had a sequel. It is the cover, it's PS3. They took the cover of Tiny Tank and just stretched it so it fit a PS3 shaped box, and they added 2 Tiny Tanks to the left and the right that are colored green and pink. So that should have been my first tip. And I'm just going to read what this entry says for Tiny Tank 2 because this got such a big laugh out of me right before we started recording. Here is exactly what it says. I will act it out to the best of my ability. Tiny Tank 2. An outright fabrication by a wishful 5-year-old, plainly seen by the fact that not a single company mentioned in the sidebar of this article even exists as typed. The publisher mentioned, in fact, being a game released by War Gaming. All of this is further supported by the fact that the chosen platform, PlayStation 3, is now well past its development cycle. Now on to why I choose to type this out. I hate bullshit Wikipedia articles, and this is a prime example. And it goes on. It goes on. The comments are just like, hey man, why don't you just delete this page? I did not expect to find so much internet comedy out of this game. This was terrific. And the crazy thing is it looks like this went up sometime around like 2019.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're really hitting the prime nostalgia for this. I mean, I don't think I would be out of line to say that that's what prompted our episode on this. But when you look at the comments of those playthroughs, it's all like stuff from 2 or 3 years ago that's like, oh man, I remember this game. I can't believe nobody knows about this. It really deserves a remaster and a sequel. So there is like a small little, soft spot in people's hearts, 30-something-year-olds' hearts that played this when they were kids. It really spoke to us somehow, and it's really hitting that nostalgia bone, even though, there's not a lot of meat on that bone as we're finding out as we look back on it critically.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about remakes all the time. Like we're in a remake kind of, I do not want to say remake renaissance because that phrase sounds like poison to me, but we're seeing a lot of remakes. This is a game that would be ripe for a remake. Like I can imagine a remake of this being done extraordinarily well if it was in the right hands, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right. If you get it in the right hands, like you'd have to find the right comedic touch. Like that would be the big challenge. All of the stuff that we griped about in this game would be instantly better by just having any bit of modern quality of life or, technology, the way the games control, the way the graphics look, like all of that would just like instantly be 100,000% better. But to update the comedy, either bringing it directly as is probably doesn't work. Updating it probably gets a little dangerous because it loses, whatever that special like late 90s quality is that we, enjoy, even though we recognize some of its problematic nature. If you fully update the humor, does it still come off the same way? So I think it poses a challenge in that way. It's like one of those things that's stuck in its time, and if you take it out of its time, does it still work? I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to get so philosophically adjacent there.
I'm sorry. I know that we're starting to go like the seriousness of this is going off the rails, but I just feel this pressure when I'm on your show that I have to, reach this standard of aplomb and analytical depth that I can't help but go there. Plus, I don't get to flex this muscle very much in other spaces.
Well, let me counteract that by saying a plum, I much prefer an orange. I fucking hate myself.
You should have said, "Orange, you glad
I..." That's Tiny Tank, everybody. I mean, I had a lot of fun. There you go. I had a lot of fun revisiting this. I mean, I'm not going to play it again, almost certainly, unless I have folks over and like we just want to play stuff. But, you know, this was a core memory for me. And I'm really glad that it was for you too, and that we could just, you know, shoot the shit on Mike about it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad this was on your list. Like, my eyes lit up as soon as I saw it. And I was like, how has no one claimed this already? All right, I'll dive in. So glad that you kind of, if it wasn't on your list, I don't think it would have popped into my mind to do. So thank you for that. And thank you for inviting me on. I think you're right. I'm not going to play this game again. I think the bar is, if you and I are in the same state with a PS1, we should play this on co-op and we should drink a lot. But otherwise, I think we just let it lie. We look fondly back on our memories and we move forward into the gaming landscape in the future.
Here, man. Well said. Save that. Keep a pin in that, because we will make that happen. Tiny Tank, everybody. I think you should play it if you have a fondness for 90s video games. If nothing else, it can be an hour of a decent time. If you want to buy it physically, it's like $15. It's not that expensive. Otherwise, just emulate it. It's all good. And that about wraps it up, man. Charlie, thank you for joining me once again. A little bit different from, was Lisa the last one, or did we do something in between then and now?
We did Portal 2.
Oh, that's right, Portal 2. Oh, so yeah, kind of different. We're going from the utterly macabre and getting progressively sillier and sillier until we get to like Bubsy 3D or something.
Yeah, and we're going from like perfection in game design to Tiny Tank.
If you want to talk more about Tiny Tank and check out if I have uploaded any Tiny Tank emojis to the server, which might happen because we're recording this well in advance, you can do that by checking out the episode description. You can find a link to our Discord server in there. You can join, you can hang out. It'll be a good time. You can also find us on socials like Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. That's the newest one. We finally got over to there. And if you want to check out our Patreon page, you can do so at www.patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. It's a great time. So once again, thanks, Charlie, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is McCann Rickcore. Take care, everybody.
Come and meet the new machine from Centrax. He's got a cannon for a nose. He's a little guy with a laser for an eye. He has metal treads instead of toes.
That's me.
He's got machine guns in his turret. He likes to talk to boys and girls. He's a funny little thing, and he loves to dance and sing. Most of all, he loves to save the world. Tinkety-tink.
It's cheesy.
Clickety-clack.
Really cheesy.
New from Centrax. Tiny Tank. Here's Tiny.
Well, Tiny, what did you think?
What is up with that tinky tinky?
I thought it was kind of catchy. Shut up, Fred.